It's my birthday. Technically the day I'm posting this is my birthday, but it's my birthday. I'm turning 31 years old, which according to social media means I should have turned into a pile of dust 2 years ago. But in honor of my birthday, I wanted to make a video showing off the movies that made me. I have a list on my letterbox, which you should all follow by the way, that contains my favorite movie from every year I've been alive. The list starts with a movie from 1994 and works its way up to the now. So we're going to go through it year by year and give a quick explanation as to why each movie is on this list. Please keep in mind it is favorite movie from every year I've been alive, not necessarily the best movie from every year I've been alive, because I do think that is different. But without further ado, let's just get into it. And you can't yell at me because it's my birthday. My pick for 1994 is a bit cliche, but it's The Lion King. The Lion King is one of our best animated movies. It is epic, it is grand. That score is insane. Voice cast stacked. I mean, like, what is there to say about this movie that has not already been said? It's phenomenal. For 1995, we're gonna go with a little gem called Toy Story. Fun fact about me, Toy Story is the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater. According to my mom, I fell asleep mid-screening and I woke up at the end and kept demanding that they rewind the thing. I think Toy Story is another one of those landmark animated films. It really pushed the medium forward. I also just think it launched Pixar as this, like, really ingenious, clever, creative studio to watch. And again, like, what is there to say that hasn't already been said about the genius of Toy Story? Sidebar, you are going to see a lot of animated gems on this list. I was raised on animation. It is kind of in my DNA, so there is going to be a lot of animation here. But not for 1996. For 1996, my favorite movie is Scream. I think Scream is one of those movies that really changed the way I interacted with horror. As a kid, I used to be afraid of literally everything. I'm not kidding, like everything. When Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets came out, I had to cover the drains because the basilisk traveled through the pipes, and that scared me so bad. And then the first time, much later, I watched Scream, I wasn't scared. Like, I did get exhilarated by the movie. It did have my blood pressure through the roof for the time being, but, like, I didn't go to bed terrified that night. It didn't traumatize me. It was so much fun, and I thought it was so smart the way it, like, deconstructed and played with the genre. In a weird way, I think that deconstruction and awareness of the genre made me understand and appreciate the genre, and now I'm a big ol' horror fan, so thanks, Scream. For 1997, it's Hercules. I think this movie is criminally slept on. I'm a sucker for Greek mythology, and while this isn't the most faithful retelling of the Greek myths, I think it's still like a fun interpretation, and it's a fun introduction to that world for younger audiences. Also, the muses are incredible. Their songs, iconic, shifted the culture. 98, we have A Bug's Life. I jokingly, but also not jokingly, say A Bug's Life radicalized me. I think this movie is much smarter than a lot of people give it credit for. It unfortunately falls between Toy Story 1 and 2, so I think it gets a little lost in the Pixar canon, but this movie is a really great examination of, like, unionizing and rising up against your oppressor. It's deeply anti-capitalism. It's so fun. It is Seven Samurai, but with insects. For 1999, I went with Drop Dead Gorgeous. This movie is utterly ridiculous in the smartest way. I always say that, like, really dumb, silly things are actually really smart. You have to be super intelligent to pull off dumb and silly. And I think this movie is, like, so silly, but also just, like, whip smart with what it's trying to do. It's really cool seeing a lot of women who would go on to be big names in, like, their early days. This was also the movie that made me realize, oh, Kirsten Dunst can kind of do anything. I was watching this and I was like, what an insane filmography this woman has. For 2000, I have The Emperor's New Groove. Similarly, like, really stupid, silly, but also just, like, really smart in how it pulls it off. It's so perpetually out of pocket and absurd. It feels like a fever dream in the best way. And I think Yzma and Kronk are, like, all-time Disney villain duo. For 2001, I have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. First and foremost, it's fuck J.K. Rowling forever. I think this movie is a lovely gem. It is an excellent piece of family filmmaking. I think it's a really great example of fantasy filmmaking. Like, they really, really went for it, and I think it's so like well crafted. It's so lovingly made. Yeah, I love it. And for some reason, it is a long film, but it never feels that way. I could just sit and watch it over and over again as a kid, and I could probably do it now. For 2002, I have Chicago. This is probably one of the best movie musicals of all time, and I definitely think it's one of those rare instances where the movie adaptation enhances the source material. I think it takes what really works about the stage show and just like utilizes the film format to enhance it tenfold. I think it's really genius the way it operates on that parallel, like we have the imagination of them on stage performing, but also like how it is woven in with them performing in the real world. I think it's genius. 2003, it's my favorite movie of all time. This is, no joke, my number one favorite movie ever. It's Big Fish. This, I think, is Tim Burton's best movie as well. I think it's a beautiful film about storytelling, about legacy, about how we measure ourselves and our self worth. I also think it's like a beautiful story about like impact and people and like how we connect with people and that ripples out through generations. What can I say? Fathers and sons who don't get along and can't see eye to eye ruins me every time. I'm a sucker for it. For 2004, not to go back to it, but I have Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is an excellent fantasy film. It's the best in the franchise. Alfonso Cuarón really breathed a lot of life into this. I loved how he took it in the darker direction that the source material also takes. I think he gives it a very distinct visual flair as well that really ripples through the rest of the franchise. Introduces some of the most interesting characters played by some of the best actors we've got. It's really well done, and I just think the whole time turner like sequence, that whole chunk of the movie is brilliant, like right down to the score. You can hear ticking in the score. That's genius. It was just that moment where you could feel that franchise really level up, and not that like the first two are bad in any way, but it really needed to, and it really rose to the occasion. For 2005, it's the greatest superhero movie of all time, Sky High. I am planning a video about this for its 20th anniversary later this year, so I won't get too deep into it, but I just think this movie is a beautiful fusion of comic book meets coming of age. It's like John Hughes adapted a comic book. Like, what more do we need? This cast is kind of the who's who of teen stars at the time who would kind of go on to be like really great heavy hitters in the industry, and that adult cast is stellar as well. Very clever, very self-aware, but really earnest as well. It doesn't like look down on the very genre it's trying to embody. For 2006, I went with Little Miss Sunshine. First time I saw this, I was probably way too young to watch it, but I just remember being really tickled by it, and revisiting it as an adult, I loved it even more. I love how like sweet and earnest this movie is. Yes, it's kind of bleak at times, but there's this earnestness that really permeates the whole thing. It's a really lovely love letter to dysfunctional families and like the people who just like make it work. This is probably my favorite Steve Carell performance. We've also got a young Paul Dano in this who's giving work like way beyond his years. It's crazy. 2007 is Enchanted. Amy Adams should have won an Oscar for this, and I don't even mean that to be like hyperbolic or ironic. I genuinely think this is one of the most committed performances ever put to film. Similarly to Sky High, it has like this big old wink it's giving to the camera, but it never does so meanly. It's like this lovely homage to the legacy, but it also is not afraid to poke fun at the legacy, and it's one of those instances where it is a parody, but it is also functioning really well as the thing it is parodying. James Marsden's amazing in this. Susan Sarandon is like deliciously evil in this. Patrick Dempsey's great. That character could easily kind of be very bland, but I really like what he does there. It's just a great movie. 2008 is my favorite Pixar film, Wall-E. This is like a Charlie Chaplin movie set in space. It's like a great example on the power of imagery. Like, this movie has very little dialogue going on, but it still really packs an emotional punch. And somehow its themes kind of feel more prescient than ever, huh? Because while it is also a love story, it's also a cautionary tale about what happens when we kind of forget about connection and forget about our humanity. and how like we really can't progress or make the world better without it. 2009 is Coraline. I don't know if you're sensing a pattern, but I love like weird quirky shit. I love how dark this movie is. I don't think this movie is a kid's movie, nor does it like dumb itself down for anybody, but it also feels like a lovely little introduction into horror for younger audiences while still giving like adult audiences something to latch on to in terms of its darkness and more horrific pieces. I rewatched this for the anniversary in theaters and I was like, wow. The other mother, specifically in the third act, is terrifying. She's a giant insect and is just like utterly frightening. Outside of that piece, I think it is just beautiful. Like, this is such a triumph of stop motion animation and animation at large. Really entertaining, really beautiful. I love it so much. It puts a big smile on my face, which is weird to say because it is so weird and creepy. But yeah, God, I love this movie. For 2010, it's Easy A. I remember seeing this in high school. I remember seeing it opening weekend, and I think it's such a great encapsulation of high school in that time as like this digital social media age was about to like really take off. Like, it hadn't become what it is today, right? And it was still in its infancy, but it had become a normal part of our lives, and it was really cool watching a realistic depiction of navigating that world. I think it's a really clever reimagining of the Scarlet Letter, and Emma Stone is a star in this. Watching it back, like, oh, she's always just been that good, huh? For 2011, I went with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I think it was just a great encapsulation of this mega franchise that had been going on for years. I think it's a perfect example of sticking the landing, really emotionally cathartic and powerful. It did exactly what it needed to do. Please don't make a TV series. Like, let's just leave it. For 2012, I have Perks of Being a Wallflower. I know that's so cliche, but this book and this movie like came into my life right when I needed it. I was a freshman in college, and it kind of just changed my life. It really changed my life. I love what it just says about connection and friendship and like how we need people and how we navigate difficult times with people. I was 18 when I saw this, and I had really never seen mental health depicted that way before in such like an honest and non-stigmatized way, and I think like I really needed that. And I loved that it just didn't shy away from like the messiness or the like dark spots of the story, and I think that allows the lighter aspects to shine. I know that's so cliche, but I like love this movie. I still cry when they drive down the tunnel. 2013 is The Bling Ring. This movie is horrifically misunderstood. I think a lot of people write it off as shallow. A lot of people put it at the lower end of their Sofia Coppola rankings, and I think that's so incorrect. I think this is one of her best movies. I think this movie is such a time capsule of what it was like in the time it's covering. Like, celebrity culture was at such an all-time high, and it really just captures the energy and the obsession and the freneticism of that era. Speaking as someone who was like coming of age at that time, really loved the feminine energy of the movie as well. I guested on Female Gaze the Film Club, and we really talked about that aspect of it, and it just like made me appreciate the movie even more. Also, Emma Watson, terrific in this. Kind of a comedic masterclass. 2014 is The Lego Movie. Sorry, y'all. I love this movie. I adore this movie. It's so funny. It felt like such a breath of fresh air when I was seeing it in theaters. I remember me and my roommates going to see it being like, this is going to be ridiculous, isn't it? And we were just like dying laughing. The whole theater was laughing out loud the entire runtime. Not to be corny, but it felt very magical. Like, I could not believe what I was watching. I can't believe this movie exists. I can't believe they pulled it off. I think it's really smart, fresh, self-aware. I think it's such a gem. It's delightful. It's fun. For 2015, I'm going with The Hateful Eight. Controversially, this is my favorite Tarantino movie. I love how it feels like a play. For the most part, it's a chamber piece. We're confined to the cabin for a lot of the movie. So I love watching those characters like really like clash and unfold and play off of one another. I'm also just such a sucker for pieces of media that has all these tangled threads and like has one of those and this is how it all connects moments. I love it. Also Samuel L. Jackson and Walton Goggins Oscar snubs. 2016 Moonlight. I think this is a beautiful depiction of queerness. I don't know, this movie just kind of feels like water. It feels like a dreamy memory, the way everything kind of ripples together. It's just beautiful. I recently read the screenplay. I have the A24 book, and even that got me emotional. I just think it's so straightforward and so honest and so beautiful. Moonlight is like a movie that feels so simple but is so complex all at the same time. It's just a breathtaking piece of work. 2017 is Lady Bird. As someone who also went to Catholic school in the early aughts, I was like, oh, this is my life, kinda. This is it. Just like, I think it's such a great and honest depiction of coming of age. Like I mentioned with some of these other films, it's such a great encapsulation of that time. As someone who was around in that time, I think it's a beautiful, like, mother-daughter story. I love how it, like, really showcases like the complications of relationships with your parents and like the growing pains that come with it. It like beautifully goes into that idea about how everything feels so big when you're that age. Everything feels impossibly big. And then once you kind of step away from it and get out into the real world, you kind of realize like, oh, like none of that mattered, yet it all like really made me who I am. And you're really grateful for like what shaped you. There's this restlessness to leave a hometown that feels suffocating, but once you like leave it, you're able to kind of see it and love it for what it is. Oh, I love it. I could cry. For 2018, I have decided to go with Widows. I recently changed my 2018 selection, but the more that time goes on, the more and more appreciation and love I have for Widows. I loved it when I saw it initially in theaters, but this movie was criminally underrated and underappreciated when it came out, and I just think it is such a meticulous and thoughtful and insanely smart thriller. Performances across the board, insane. Insane. Like, we are getting acting master classes. Vividly recall me and the older gentleman who went alone to the theater. We were sitting next to each other, and there's a twist in this movie. We both, our recliners, like, sat up together in unison. We were hooked. This movie is so gripping and so smart without ever doing too much, you know? 2019 might be like my favorite year in recent memory for movies. We have Parasite, which I love, Little Women, which I love. Like, those were my number one and two of the year. But I went with Booksmart just because it was a movie that felt so for me and my friends. Like, that is exactly who I was in high school. The person who was a little too afraid to go out and do bad things, who was so obsessed with being good and doing the right thing that you kind of forgot to enjoy yourself. It's so funny and smart, but it doesn't feel like an older person trying to write as a younger generation. It feels very authentic and very lived in and very real. Beanie Feldstein and Caitlin Dever are great in it, and Billy Lord, my goodness, what a powerhouse. For 2020, I went with Minari. I think this movie is so beautiful. Another movie I think that is criminally underrated and underappreciated. It's a really sweet and tender movie about the American dream and trying to make that work for you. And I think it does a really interesting job at juxtaposing, like, we have this man who is going for his dream and really trying to make it a reality versus like his wife who doesn't feel like this is something she wants and who doesn't feel that it's tangible for them. I love the character of David and his grandma. Like, she reminded me so much of my grandmother. David says in the movie, like, you're not like a normal grandma, and has all these complaints. And like, my grandma was an immigrant from Brazil, and like, she wasn't like a normal grandma. She liked to play games and she cheated all the time. She always swore and cursed. She had these like weird little things that like normal grandmas didn't do. And yeah, just like reminded me so much of her. 2021 is Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Minus one glaring performance, this movie is pretty near perfect. Everyone in it is giving such beautiful work and really pouring themselves into this piece. I think it's a beautiful reimagining of the classic work. I love how they kind of work in conversation with one another, both the original West Side Story movie and this current one. It's beautiful. Those musical numbers are like so impressively staged and so like meticulously thought out. It's just like breathtaking on every level. The vocals, the performances, the dance numbers. It's breathtaking. For 2022, it's everything everywhere all at once. I do not play around about this movie. I think it's so beautiful. It's so like unlike anything we've ever seen. I think it deserved pretty much every single Oscar it won. I think the revisionism I see some people try to do in like the last year is really kooky, crazy, silly. But I think it's a beautiful movie about family and trying to cut through the noise and understand each other and reevaluate like your relationship and meet the people in your life as they are, not as you want them to be. It's silly and weird, but it has like a lot of heart, and I think it is like a beautiful movie for now. I love that it examines like why life is meaningful, even though maybe it isn't meaningful. It's hard to see, but I also have a googly eye tattoo. I'm not kidding about this movie. For 2023, my favorite movie, not the best movie of the year, but my favorite was Barbie. I loved Barbie. Seeing Barbie as a grown man in theaters, like at the pink party, wearing all pink, and just like being able to enjoy it was so healing for the little inner child in me, that little boy who loved to play Barbies but had to do it in secret, who would ask his sister to ask for Barbies for Christmas and birthday so he could play with Barbies, you know? Like, it was just very healing and cathartic for me. I just love what it says about femininity and motherhood, and, you know, people talked about it being heavy handed, but like, I think that's great. Like, this is like a beautiful introduction for young people into like feminism and womanhood and like understanding allyship, and yeah, I love it, and it's also like really clever and fun. So like let's just have fun. My 2024 favorite is Wicked. I saw it 5 times in theaters, a sixth time at home. I understand it's not perfect, and I hear those criticisms, and I recognize those criticisms. But this movie makes me feel so many things. This movie makes me feel like I am soaring. I just like love it. It fills me with so much joy and happiness. It is everything that little 10-year-old who would race home to like watch Wicked content secretly needed it to be. It's just beautiful. I think it enhances the source material without ever stepping on it and scoffing at it, and it like really maintains the homage piece of it. I love it so much. It makes me so happy. Again, like I said earlier, these are just my favorites and movies that like really mean a lot to me personally. These aren't necessarily what I think is the best, although some of these are what I thought were the best of that year. That's a different video, but let me know what your comfort movies or the movies that made you are. As always, do what you're supposed to do with all the YouTube videos, like, subscribe, comment, follow me everywhere, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!